Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsta Shri Rupam Sagatatam Sagana Raghunata Mitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamsta Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusate Devi Pranamam Harimami Padipe Vanchakalpa Tirubhyascha Kupa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschatradeshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I got one video at least. That's good. That's a start. We'll start giving extra credit points for video participation. See what that does. So, welcome to our continued study of chapter 15. This week we'll be discussing chapter verses 11 through 20, so the second half of this very well-known chapter, Yoga of the Supreme Person. It's a chapter we study during Purushottam Mas and other times. It's a one that we come across, and it's a very, very potent chapter for us. So Krishna began this chapter, the first 6 verses, talking about how to detach from the material world and the illusory gifts that it supposedly brings, and how to attach to reality. So to detach from the reflective world and attach to the reality, which is the spiritual world. And then in verses 7 through 11, we'll touch one of those verses today. He spoke about the transmigration of the soul, how the soul moves from body to body. And then from there, he's going to discuss then and explain in very vivid terms how we are all fully dependent on the mercy of the Lord, both internally and externally. And the conclusion is that one should surrender. And then finally in verses 16 through 20, Krishna is going to provide a summary of the entire Vedanta Sutra. Verses 16, 17, and 18 are the Trishloki verses specifically that summarizes this Vedanta Sutra and speaks about our sambandha, our relationship with Krishna. So, in the opening of this chapter, Krishna provides a very vivid metaphor for the material world, which is this giant banyan tree with complex structure of webs and of roots and branches, and you cannot really trace out the beginning or the end of this very gigantic tree, and it symbolizes the material world. And the living entity is jumping from branch to branch, sometimes higher branches, sometimes lower branches, trying to enjoy the fruits of this tree. But in fact, this tree is just a reflection, because its branches are going down and its roots are up. It's a reflection, like in the pool or pond of water, where a tree from the bank is being reflected into that water. And so this material world is nothing but a reflection. Everything that we're trying to enjoy in this material world exists in its pure form, in the spiritual world. And it gives us great comfort that when we detach from the material world, we're not losing anything. We're simply gaining that we are trying to enjoy, but in its pure form. Just as looking at the Taj Mahal in the reflective pond, when you then view the Taj Mahal itself, there's nothing lost. You're only gaining a more vivid experience. And so similarly, Krishna has used this very powerful metaphor. And the key for us is trying to find out how to extricate ourselves from it, right? How to detach from that. And he said that detachment from the material world is the key, and to cut ourselves free. And what sharpens that weapon of detachment is good intelligence, discrimination, knowing what is right, what is wrong, and being able to act upon it. So last week we ended in the 10th verse with Krishna speaking about the foolish who cannot see how this living entity is transmigrating from body to body. And so we'll continue that theme here for a moment, and then we'll get into the next section of this chapter. So in 11, Krishna says, the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all of this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. So here, those who do not want to purify their hearts by hearing and chanting can't see this transmigration of the soul from body to body. They don't see it. From higher types of bodies to lower types of bodies. And they don't see what is happening to them, that they are trapped within this prison house of the material world, this reflective reality. And so they don't see it because they don't have a pure heart to see the difference between spirit and matter. And ultimately, what is blinding these people is the attempts to lord it over material nature, to be master of domain, blinded by so many desires, trying to be the owner and enjoyer. They cannot see reality. But who can see it? The endeavoring transcendentalists. So not even the perfected, but the endeavoring. So those who are trying can begin to see this, right? So Srila Prabhupada in the purport speaks about so many yogis in the world, no shortage of yoga, but it is almost exclusively focused on trying to find a fit body and maybe some health to the mind. But that is not the completion of yoga. That is just barely scratching the surface, right? There's no concept of understanding spirit soul. So this topic of spirit soul and its connection with the Supreme Lord is the realm of the bhakti yogis, and that is the real and ultimate yoga system to be engaged in devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada makes that point in the 11th verse. So now Krishna in these verses is going to begin to speak to us about, is there a way to see Krishna without this knowledge that he referred to in verse 10? Is there any way for us to perceive? And Krishna said, yes. The beginning of Krishna consciousness is to see how he is present everywhere, supporting us in so many different ways. Everyone can see the sun, the moon, fire, and understand how it impacts our life. And ultimately, we can understand that the splendor from all of these things, they come from Krishna. So this is the beginning of Krishna realization. These next 4 verses will speak on that. Verse 12. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me. And the splendor of the moon and the splendor of the fire are also from me. So here, again, one without knowledge of the intricate, subtle science of the soul and matter still can begin their journey in Krishna consciousness by observing, the sun, the moon, the fire, and understand that its splendor, it comes from Krishna. We need all of these things to be able to live and to try to enjoy, right? And who is providing it all? It is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. And so we can see immediately, actually we cannot live even a second without Krishna. Not even for 1 millisecond. How can we live without the fire of the sun? We can't, right? How could we live without the nutrients provided by the moon to all of the vegetables, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So we can see even the foodstuffs, we have to cook our foods or make things in the factories, as Srila Prabhupada says. So these elements we are fully dependent on. And what Krishna says here, the splendor of each of them, it comes from the Supreme Lord. So our existence here in the material world is being fully maintained by the Supreme Lord. And understanding this is the beginning of Krishna consciousness. Appreciating the presence of Krishna in the sun, the moon, the fire, all these essential elements of our existence. And this will eventually take us to the mood of surrender, recognizing that we are fully dependent on the Lord. Okay? Next, I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon, and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. So who is holding all these planets in perfect orbit? I mean, the planets move in such precision that we know from decades to come, at the exact moment, every eclipse will occur. Because everything is happening with exact precision. And imagine if the Earth was moving closer and further away from the sun in random times. What would our existence be like? It'd be completely upheaved. Imagine if the Earth was spinning at a faster or slower rate one day than the other. We'd be completely disheveled. So, who is putting this all together? Krishna spoke in the 7th chapter that he is, keeping order in this world as string is holding a pearl necklace together. Now we see specifically Krishna, by his energy, is holding these planets together and holding them in perfect orbit. Now we also see the greatness of Krishna. Can any human or arrange for even a single planet to stay in its orbit? Not even close. Right? So again, our entire existence, including the orbits of this planet, is based on the arrangement of Krishna. Without him, everything would scatter in our solar system even. And we would be in a completely upheaval situation. Right? So, next verse, 14. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities. I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuffs. So we see the moon, right? We'll start with the basics of the food. The moonlight is known. It is what gives juice, life, nutrients to all the vegetables. So what we would do without the moon? Even if you are a meat eater, those vegetables are needed to feed the animals that one then consumes. So one, regardless of their dietary situation, is fully dependent on the moon. The sun, it gives us warmth. It leads to the creation of oxygen through photosynthesis from all the plants and trees, which we need to be able to breathe. Of course, it is required to grow all of the food. So, the sun and the moon are critical. We know in the spiritual world, there is no sun or moon. Everything was illuminated, right, coming from the Brahmajyoti of the Supreme Lord. Krishna spoke in the 6th verse of this chapter. But to feed this material machinery, this body, this kshetra, it needs the sun and moon. Fire. Fire is used to make so many things. Prabhupada talks about what your factories will do without fire. It's so true. But not only for the things, say, no, I don't need anything, but to even digest the foods. You say, no, I don't need fire to cook my foods, I'll have a raw diet. Okay, great, you can have a raw diet, but you still need fire in the belly to be able to digest those foods. So, who is helping? That is actually Krishna. He says, I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuffs. He even is the fire in our belly. And it is known that the digestive enzymes in the stomach are not found anywhere else in the world. They're not found anywhere. So Krishna is that heat that is turning the foods into energy to fuel this body. Could we be any more dependent on him? Is it possible? No. Every last item, not only to grow, but to even digest the food. And we know, can we enjoy anything in this world, in this life, without at least some minimum foods to eat? You can have all the fame, all the strength, all the beauty, all the power, everything, all the wealth. But if you don't have basic food to eat, we have no existence. Right? And so Krishna is truly doing everything. And we're just trying to enjoy. You know, though we're dependent on him, the conditioned souls do not acknowledge that everything he is giving and is in our complete dependence. Right? That we have no existence without it. The conditioned soul does not see. But of course, one who just takes a few moments of introspection and reflection will clearly understand. You know, even if we acknowledge that we need the sun, many will concoct that the sun is created by nature. It just manifests. Right? But we know nothing comes out of a factory without the interaction of some person. There's always a person behind everything that's created. Yet, the atheist will want to say, no, it just manufactured, it just happens. It is nonsense. It is all arranged by the Supreme Person. And so we can see very vividly through these three verses that our whole existence, from big to small, including the ability to digest the most basic of foods, is fully supported and maintained by the Supreme Lord. And the only logical conclusion is to then surrender. But Krishna is going to go even further in the next verse. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So this is a very important verse. Krishna is now showing that not only is he supporting us externally through all the different manifestations of the sun, the moon, fire, but he's also supporting us in our heart, sitting in our heart, to give us the ultimate ability to try to be an enjoyer. He is the complete maintainer, beyond compare. And we'll see how. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur comments that Krishna is seated in our heart and is the principle of our intelligence that allows us to remember things from previous experiences, forget them as well. And all of our perception, knowledge, this ability is coming from Krishna. This ability to perceive things that come from the different senses, that ability is all coming from the Supreme Lord. So this verse specifically shows us that not only is he all-pervading around the world externally, but again, also sitting within our heart and enabling us to try to enjoy in so many different ways. And so it is complete dependence, again, we have on Krishna. And the conclusion, again, of these verses is that we must surrender to his loving care. So, forgetfulness, remembrance, and knowledge. These are three things Krishna says in the first half of this verse. They all come from Krishna. And he provides these, he gives these to us to allow us to try to enjoy separate from him, trying to fulfill our very foolish desire. So let's see how each of these allow us to enjoy. So when he says he's a source of forgetfulness, what is he allowing us to forget? He is allowing us to forget our past lives. If we remembered our past lives, we'd be so confused. There'd be no peace of mind. We can barely keep a peaceful mind managing this existence. Imagine if we're remembering when we were a bird and a monkey and a snake and a different race and a different gender and all kinds of, and a monkey and a chimpanzee. What kind of existence we can have? We can barely control the mind that is, remembering this life. So Krishna allows us to forget, to have some semblance of a peace of mind. He allows us to also forget the pains of our past sinful reactions. You know, He allows us to forget what it was like to be suspended in a bag of our own fluids, upside down for 9 months, waiting to emerge from the womb of our mother. Why does He allow us to forget? So we can still have some semblance of how to enjoy. Right? He also allows us to forget Him. He allows us to forget our eternal position and try to enjoy, these material activities. If we did it, we'd be trying to enjoy with a guilty conscience. So Krishna, trying to fulfill our desires, allows us to forget our past pains, our past lives, and our past situations, and including allows us to forget even Krishna Himself, all to try to allow us to try to enjoy. So this is the situation, and we know, the best actor on the stage is one who forgets their real life and is fully absorbed in this, stage performance. So like that, Krishna allows us to forget everything so we can try to enjoy in this material world. You see, Krishna is trying His best to fulfill our desire. And though we are finding suffering over and over again, it is not by the lack of support from the Supreme Lord. Even though it goes against what He desires for us, He allows us to forget. He is the source of remembrance. So how does that allow us to enjoy? Remembrance. We get to remember all of our past desires stored in our mind. All the different ways that we want to try to enjoy the material world. Krishna allows us to remember those so we can try to act upon them. It is the Supreme Lord Himself who is the source of that memory, that remembrance. And the knowledge, how to acquire some sense gratification, how to manipulate matter in some ways to obtain some sense enjoyment. He is the source of that knowledge. How to make a movie, how to make some intoxicants, how to make different types of foodstuffs, so all the things that we try to enjoy in this material world. Krishna is the source of that knowledge. So you can see how through forgetfulness, remembrance, and knowledge, Krishna is enabling us to try to enjoy this material world. Even though there is no enjoyment, it ultimately ends in misery. Still, Krishna is trying. He didn't leave us to our own volition to try to figure it out. And this is the unlimitedly merciful nature of the Lord. So one may think, well, wait a minute, why is He doing this? Life would be easier if He did it. Well, He's simply answering our desire. We desire to try to enjoy separate from Him. So Krishna is facilitating, both externally, through all the physical manifestations, and also as seated in our heart. But what about if we don't want to enjoy matter, and we want to enjoy with Krishna? Then what does He do? Well, that is the second half of the verse, right? Where He says, by all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So in the second half of the verse, Krishna is showing how He helps those who want to give up this false role, this reflective reality. Right? First part, how to enjoy separate from Krishna, and in these three different ways. Now, in the second half, Krishna is showing how He helps those who want to enter into reality, who want to give up this frustrating attempts to try to find happiness in the material world. So what does He do? Krishna comes. He incarnates as one of His incarnations, Srila Vyasadeva, to give the Vedas, which is all about knowledge. And what is it knowledge of? What is the goal of the Vedas? To know Krishna. And when one knows Krishna, one engages in loving devotional service, the conclusion of which is eternal bliss and happiness. So the Vedas give us this knowledge and the process of how to know Krishna and how to come back to Him. Right? So Krishna gives the intelligence to know the Vedas, if that is the desire of the jiva. So just like knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness come to help us try to enjoy separate, those three also can come to help us remember again our lost relationship with Krishna. This process of devotional service is simply remembering our lost relationship. And it is not lost, it is just dormant within our hearts. So there are 3 steps, 3 stages to achieving this perfection of eternal life of devotional service. And that is all given by Krishna. The first step is we have to understand our relationship with Krishna. This is sambandha gyan, knowledge of my relationship with Krishna. When we come to know our relationship with Krishna, what happens? We begin to act in that relationship. That is the second stage. This abhideya gyan, knowledge of what to do now knowing my relationship with Krishna. That is step 2. First I know the relationship, then I act in it. And step 3, I get the result of acting in that relationship, the fruit of that activity. That is prayojana. And that is Krishna prema, love of God. The greatest thing the living entity can acquire. It's not on Amazon. It's not on Google Marketplace or Facebook Marketplace or any store. It is available within our hearts, lying dormant. And it is achieved through knowing our relationship, sambandha, acting in that relationship, abhideya, and the result, Krishna prema, eternal bliss and happiness. So this is the 3-step process. And the next 5 verses are going to explain each of these 3 steps. Okay? But before we get to verse 16, just summarize, the main point here is that we need Krishna for whatever we want to enjoy. To enjoy matter, we need Krishna. To enjoy spirit, we need Krishna. Either way, we are fully dependent on Him. So this important fundamental realization is very vividly described in verses 12 through 15. It is the only conclusion one can come to by studying this is surrender to Krishna. We are fully dependent on Him. So the remainder of this chapter now, 16, 17, and 18 verses will speak to our sambandha, our relationship with Krishna. Verse 19 will speak to the activities, the abhideya. What does one do in that relationship? And finally, in verse 20, we'll see the fruit, the result of that relationship, the prayojana. Okay? So that's the next 5 verses. Verse 16, there are 2 classes of being, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. Okay? So these 3 verses, 16, 17, 18, these are called the 3 shloki verses. So we have the Chatur shloki verses in chapter 10. These are called the 3 shloki verses. They speak about our sambandha, and they summarize the Vedic knowledge that is provided. Specifically, Srila Vyasadeva has compiled the Vedanta Sutras, which is the essence of the Vedas, and this is the summary of the Vedanta Sutras. So Krishna himself now here is directly speaking on the summary contents of the Vedanta Sutra that Srila Vyasadeva has put into the Vedanta Sutras. So very interesting that Krishna himself is directly speaking this summary, right? So this gives us the real purpose of Vedic knowledge. Right? So this begins. The real purpose of Vedic knowledge, it was asked by Arjuna, and it's very misunderstood broadly. What is the purpose of Veda? So many different rituals are there, so many different gods are mentioned, so many this, that. No. There's only one supreme personality of Godhead. And so the entire purport of the Vedas is to know Krishna, as he is spoken in the last verse. Right? So there are innumerable living entities, and they are eternally separated fragmental parts. That means we always are individual, both in the spiritual world and in the material world. So the difference is there are 2 classes. One is fallible, one is infallible. Both are eternally separated parts. And so who is fallible? All of us who have come to the material world seeking some type of pleasure separate from Krishna. Right? The conditioned souls swimming in the material world, they are fallible. And who is infallible? Those in the spiritual world who are in oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? And so when one is liberated in the spiritual world, or in the liberated consciousness, one is considered infallible. And what is meant by when we say oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It means one in desire, detached from matter. Krishna is detached from matter, so is a living entity. Right? So Srila Prabhupada says very beautifully in the purport, he says, they are all agreeable to the purpose of creation. That is oneness. Both the living entity and Krishna, they understand the purpose of creation. We were created to be enjoyed by Krishna. And all the facilities in the spiritual world are to be used to be enjoyed by Krishna. There is no misunderstanding of the purpose of creation. That very vividly explains this concept of oneness. It is not one in identity. Again, eternally separated fragmental parts. Okay? So this verse 16 is the first of the 3 verses on Sambandha, and this is Brahman realization. 17. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the 3 worlds and is maintaining them. So besides these two, the fallible and the infallible, there is the Supersoul. The Supersoul is clearly separate from the other 2. This is a critical point in the Vedas. The Jiva is distinct from the Supersoul. We saw this very vividly in chapter 13. Okay? So even the Supersoul is beyond the Jivas. Even the infallible, he is well beyond. And Prabhupada speaks about this verse from the Shastras. Nityo Nityananam Chaitanas Chaitananam. Among all the eternals, there's one supreme eternal. He doesn't quote the rest of the verse, Eko Bahunam. That Eko, one, is maintaining all these other eternals. So yes, we are eternal, but we are not the same as the Supersoul. Okay? So what makes the Supersoul special is that he can do everything. He enters into all the worlds as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, Shirodakshaya Vishnu, and becomes the fire, the sun, the moon. Can any jiva do this? Can any living entity do this? No. So, the Supersoul entering into the world, he oversees and protects the whole universe, making sure everything is remaining in order, being the supreme witness. Again, no living entity can do this. So this is the stage of Paramatma realization of our relationship. So last verse spoke about our Brahman realization of our relationship with Krishna, Sambandha. This is the Paramatma realization. And again, these 3 verses, 16 and 17 and 18, are speaking about the summary of the whole of Vedas, which is to illuminate our relationship with Krishna. 18. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and the Vedas as that supreme person, Purushottama. So here we get it. Who is Bhagavan? Lord Shri Krishna. We had Paramatma realization in the last verse. Here, Krishna reveals his original identity, the supreme person, the greatest of all. He is Purushottama. Now, how can somebody question this? How can it be confusing? Who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Krishna has said already in so many different ways, there is no truth superior to me. I am the source of everything, even the demigods and all the material creation, spiritual. Here, he is, maybe this is the nail in the coffin, right? I am the greatest. This is the nail in the coffin of all other ideas. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one can surpass him. Even the liberated souls cannot surpass him. No one can match his power, his intelligence, his fame, beauty, wealth. Yes, we may all possess some in small amounts, but nobody can match Krishna's possessions, his qualities in full. Even greater than Paramatma, discussed in a prior verse. So this is the full realization of Krishna. And the benefit of knowing Krishna as Bhagavan, the fruit of this is beginning to do devotional service. Engaging in that very sweet, loving, two-way relationship with this Supreme Person. This is Bhagavan realization. The only way to get it is through devotional service. Now, one may say, isn't it egotistical to say, I am the greatest? No. It is a fact, one. And two, Krishna does not get satisfaction by claiming himself to be the greatest, like the foolish living entity. They get enjoyment claiming themselves to be great. Krishna's claim that he is the greatest is for our benefit, not his. Is it for our benefit to understand he is the source of our shelter. He should be the abode, the object of our love, of our energy, of all of our activities. So to firmly establish that with faith in our heart, he makes this very bold and strong statement. I am the greatest. It is for our benefit only. And thus we can realize Krishna, Bhagavan realization. So this, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan realization, 3 stages of fully realizing the Supreme Lord. Right? That's very important. We give the example sometimes of light, lamp, and a fire. They're all equal in one way. But the fire is supreme because it gives that heat and light. Right? So similarly, Brahman is part of Krishna. It is his effulgence. Paramatma is an expansion. And Bhagavan is the ultimate. So we're not realizing 3 different things. They are progressive. Right? So these are the 3 verses that establish our sambandha, our relationship with Krishna. Right? Ultimately, concluding with Bhagavan realization. So now, what activities does one do having this realization? What is the result of this knowledge? 19. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without doubting, is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharat. So conclusive. Those who know Krishna as the Supreme Person, Purushottama, the only conclusion, perform devotional service. That is our eternal occupation, our Sanatana Dharma. We were created for the purpose to render devotional service to Krishna. And so if we know Krishna as the Supreme Person, we will serve Krishna. If we think we are the Supreme Person, we will serve ourselves. And the result of serving ourselves is eternal misery and suffering. And the result of serving Krishna as a Supreme Person in loving devotional service is eternal bliss and happiness. It's black and white. So simple. So straightforward. So clear. And conclusive. So this knowledge of our relationship, again, it leads to service. And Krishna says it should be without doubting. Our doubts must be extinguished. If we keep doubts, we'll not fully engage in service. Oh, maybe there's something. What is it? What about that? So Krishna is painting a very vivid story. A very vivid, from verses 12 through 15, how we are dependent on him. And now, with the conclusion of knowing our relationship, there's only one activity, devotional service. So this is the knower of everything. One who knows Krishna is supreme, nothing else to know. That is the knower. And why is this considered a knower of Krishna? It seems so limiting. I just need to know Krishna. Because when we know Krishna, we will surrender to Him. When we know Him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our most loving and ever well-wisher, our supporter and maintainer, we'll conclude with surrender and engage in devotional service. And when we engage in devotional service, everything one wants to achieve in life is accomplished. There's nothing left behind. Complete and absolute satisfaction and happiness is achieved. All this is done by the act of devotional service. So then what else can there be to know? If complete and absolute happiness is achieved by knowing Krishna and engaging in devotional service, then what else is there need to know? Do we really need to know, what planet is out there in the sky? Do we really need to know the intricacies of how this machinery of the body works? Do we really need to know, how deep the Earth's surfaces are? Think about all the amount of knowledge, research is being done. But to what end? For what purpose? Full and absolute happiness and satisfaction is achieved by knowing Krishna and our relationship. So this is why Krishna says, one who knows this is the knower of everything, because it leads to the absolute and conclusive result. So once we do bhakti, once we've come to the platform of devotional service, there's no need to acquire any more knowledge. Even deep, exhaustive spiritual knowledge is not required. Krishna explains to Uddhavji in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita. He says that once you have come to the point necessary for you to do bhakti without any doubt, without any reservation, with full faith, once you come to that point, any more jnana is not needed. It's not helpful even. You can spend millions of years acquiring knowledge, even spiritual knowledge. But if it doesn't bring one to full faith devotional service, you won't make progress towards the goal. So they say, let me understand the full of the Bhagavad Gita, then I'll start chanting. Good luck. It won't happen. Start chanting first, then you'll understand. By devotional service, knowledge will come about. Right? So one doesn't need to go out and separately pursue jnana. Right? And we saw this in the Nectar of Devotion. One ultimately, becomes free from the pursuit of jnana. Right? So all knowledge ultimately is meant to get us to know Krishna and to do devotional service. And once we're doing it, no other knowledge is needed. So this is the full knower. Very, very exacting and detailed, and also within our grasp. We can all become the knower of everything. Mr. Know-it-all. Just know Krishna is the Supreme Person as Purushottama. Keep repeating over and over again, just to bring the position for all of us to be without doubting. Because that is the key point Krishna explains here in this Abhideya verse. Knowing Krishna is supreme without doubting, the knower of everything, and they engage in devotional service. So how many times Krishna has to establish this for us? Hopefully this is the last. So that we can come to Prayojana, the conclusion. Verse 20. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one. And it is now disclosed now by me. It is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So what is the result? Perfection. Everybody is searching for perfection of life. And here it is. Prayojana. The fruit of acting in that relationship. The fruit of performing devotional service. It is perfection. This is the summary of the whole chapter. Once we know Krishna is supreme, we'll serve him with love, and the reward is we will become wise. We'll know everything. And perfect. Perfect and complete happiness. And why perfection, one may wonder. Because when bhakti is present, all material contamination and suffering is gone, absent. Prabhupada says, just like when there is sun, there is no possibility of darkness. When there is devotional service, there is no possibility of material suffering. It is the ultimate position. Now, why is this most confidential? Krishna revealing himself as supreme. This was told to only a few people. Everyone else thought him to be, some great person, maybe some powerful, but they did not understand him to be supreme personality of Godhead. So this is the confidential conclusion of the Vedas. Of course, this is not the most confidential portion of the Bhagavad Gita. We saw that in chapter 9, Raja Vidya Raja Guyam. That was the power of pure devotional service in Krishna's mystic opulences. But this is the most confidential of the Vedas. Prabhupada writes in a purport a very important dialogue about the weaknesses of heart. We should understand the weaknesses of our heart because we must overcome them to succeed, he says. We must purify from these weaknesses. There are reasons we are here, and they are due to these two weaknesses. The first, he says, is the desire to lord over material nature. We must try to purify from that. And two, this attachment and desire to own matter, to be the proprietor, the possessor. These two weaknesses must be overcome, and they are very strongly embedded in the conditioning. So how to become free? Well, Krishna spoke in the first 5 verses of this chapter. Detach from the material world. Acquire knowledge and intelligence. And cut free from this banyan tree. And the rest of the chapter tells us engage in devotional service. Purushottama Yoga, linking with the Supreme Person. Do devotional service. That is how we'll find strength to overcome these weaknesses. And Krishna refers to Arjuna here as, O sinless one. And so Prabhupada writes, how to become sinless? By doing devotional service. He says here, verse 1. One has to become free from all contamination, all sinful activities. Then he can understand. But devotional service is so pure and potent that once one is engaged in devotional service, he automatically comes to the stage of sinlessness. One doesn't have to try to become sinless first. No, just do devotional service. It's so powerful and potent, Prabhupada is saying, that one automatically comes to this stage. So this is the great potency of devotional service. In the conclusion of this chapter of Purushottam Yoga, right? This is the important part. How to break our material attachments, understand the soul's transmigration from body to body, and then seeing how Krishna is our ultimate maintainer and provider, both externally and internally. And knowing this, we will surrender, knowing him to be the Supreme Person, and engage in devotional service, and thus achieve the fruit of life, perfection, complete perfection, in unlimited eternal bliss and happiness in devotional service to Krishna. Yoga of the Supreme Person. So this is chapter 15 in detail. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Any questions, comments, discussion today?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Beautiful class, Prabhuji. Sorry, Prabhuji, I'm actually working from home, so I'm unable to. I'm going to the class, but it'll be a couple of weeks before I get back onto my video. But thank you very much for the class, Prabhuji, and very knowledgeable and very inspirational.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Prabhuji, afterwards. You go ahead.
No question, but I just wanted to make sure my understanding is right. So in the spiritual world, Krishna facilitates and we serve, Krishna enjoys. And in the material world, Krishna facilitates and we try to enjoy, but when we want to go back, then we should start serving back, whether we're in material world also.
Yeah.
By that mean, we'll get back to our original consciousness.
Yeah. So, and I'll just add one more dimension. So, in the spiritual world, when we serve, Krishna enjoys and we enjoy. Actually, we enjoy more than Krishna, which is gets to the leading of how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes to try to experience this extraordinary bliss of pure devotional service. So, in service to Krishna in the spiritual world, the living entity enjoys and Krishna enjoys. Because remember, this desire to enjoy is the nature of the spirit soul, because it is Ananda. But in the material world, when we try to enjoy separate from Krishna, we suffer. So in the material world, there is full suffering. In the spiritual world, there is full enjoyment. Now, the living entity in the material world, engaged in pure devotional service, can experience the bliss of the spiritual world. So it is not based on geography, it is based on consciousness. So, but in the material world, the vast majority are trying to enjoy matter. But one in this material world who is engaged fully in devotional service is already experiencing the bliss in the spiritual world. So the ultimate determinant is not where I am, it is where is my consciousness. Do I have sambandha, knowledge of my relationship with Krishna? And then do I have abhideya? Am I acting in that relationship? If I am, then prayojana, perfection, will be achieved regardless of where one is. And that is why the devotee doesn't even desire to go back to Godhead. Because they only desire to remain fully engaged in devotional service. Because regardless of where they are, they'll be fully satisfied in complete bliss and happiness serving Krishna. So the only desire is, Krishna, don't remove my opportunity to serve you. So the geography, again, doesn't define it. The consciousness and activities does. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Murti. Dandava Pranamas. Nataji? No, yes, Prabhuji, go ahead. Kaushik Prabhu?
Prabhuji, if you see, internally there is a deep attachment to everything what we are doing now. Right? Like it could be family, responsibility, work, money, everything. Right?
Yeah.
And of course, you are also doing devotional service and accepting Krishna as the supreme personality of God. But still, I don't know how to detach these things from our mind, because we keep lingering all day that we need to move towards one step, we need to do this and do that, and so many things run in our heart and mind. And I'm just struggling, like how will this really strike this thing, or like we're doing this and this is going to be there, and then that's all.
Yeah, so remember, Prabhupada said that bhakti is so powerful and potent that it'll make one sinless. Now, any activity separate from Krishna carries some reaction. So, in devotional service, our attachments to our family, to our work life, to our social situations, they're there. So the art of devotional service is to understand how to engage those attachments in Krishna's service also. So Krishna isn't saying you become detached from your family. He's saying you become attached to your family in consciousness of me. What does that practically mean? We love our family And if we really love our family, we want them to be happy. We want them to find perfection. Right? Isn't that what we ultimately want with our family? We want them to be perfectly happy. Well, we know what is the only means to get them perfect happiness? Devotional service. So our attachment to our family is attachment to helping them engaging in devotional service, engaging in the service of Krishna together as a family. So that relationship with family is very powerful in rendering devotional service. So we render service to our family also in connection with their service to Krishna. So we connected. Our job. We may have some attachment to our work, to our professional endeavors. And Krishna says, right, whatever you do it as an offering to me. So we do. We pursue our career. And the fruit of that career we use to serve Krishna, to spread this knowledge, to share it with others, because that will please the Supreme Lord. Krishna says at the end of the 18th chapter, there's no one more dear to me than one who shares this knowledge. So let me use the fruits of my career for such. But if my attachment to my career is my own sense of satisfaction that I've accomplished something, that satisfaction won't last. It won't yield the pleasure you really want. It won't match or come close to the satisfaction one feels in rendering devotional service. Right? So we must ultimately detach from those activities and attach to Krishna, but at the same time we don't change our position. We were speaking last night. We don't have to leave our job, our family. No, simply connect them to Krishna. And so ultimately, the fine details of how to overcome those attachments, practice devotional service, that is why Krishna told us, we must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master who guides us in the process of surrender to Krishna. By teaching us how to surrender to him, he teaches us how to surrender to Krishna. Because the facts are very black and white, very evident here, but the execution still requires some guidance and assistance. And by the mercy of Guru, one gets Krishna. And then by the mercy of Krishna, one gets Guru. So to really make conclusive progress and fully get to the goal, that is what's required. And that is why Rupa Goswami, in the 64 Angas of Bhakti, the first 5, take shelter of a spiritual master, inquire from them, render service to them, take initiation from them. That is the process, to initiate the process of devotional service. It will happen, because bhakti is so potent and powerful. We just need to keep applying it.
Thank you so much. I can see your message from it.
Hare, thank you, brother. Dandavats. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, it is a very good plan. Thank you so much for a wonderful class, Prabhuji. Couple of things. I'll start from here. In the beginning, when you mentioned about the endeavoring transcendentalist, he is able to see and understand things in the right way, but not a perfected one. So, kind of endeavoring, basically you're saying that the sadhaka can understand, but not the one who is actually ultimately certain also. Maybe I did not understand. Or are we talking about a perfected being?
No, what I meant is one doesn't have to be perfected only to be able to. Of course, the perfected soul sees everything, right? They're the knower of everything. But the endeavoring transcendentalist can understand that the soul is moving from body to body to body. So it's not that one has to come to the perfected stage to know. Even in the endeavoring stage, one will know this information. But again, the perfected soul knows everything. They're the knower of everything.
Right. And then towards the last, you said about the weakness of the heart. Could you, one point I understood, but was the desire to lord over the material nature. What was the second one?
This desire to be the owner, and I'll read the quote specifically from Srila Prabhupada, just so that we can speak from it. He says, the second weakness of the heart is that one increases the propensity to lord it over material nature. He becomes attached to matter and the possession of matter. Right? So the first is the desire to lord it over nature, and the second is this attachment to matter and the possession of matter. So this sense of proprietorship in ownership. So they're, one kind of leads to the other. But these are the weaknesses of the heart that become difficult to engage in this pure devotional service.
Yeah, Prabhu. And also, just want to clarify this point about the, you mentioned, this is something similar to what Manahari Prabhu mentioned. Basically, I think I'm understanding it, but I'm still struggling to understand. It's just like a child, who's loved by their father and mother. Sometimes they're engaging in the wrong activity, that the child. And so the parent, the consciousness of the parent is always trying to avoid the child from, satisfying that particular desire, that they're doing something wrong. But here we see that you say that Krishna is our father, right? So, but at the same time, he is fulfilling those desires which you and I know that they are actually so bad for us. And that is again leading us to so many actions, and then we are suffering ultimately. Many of us are in with the strong Maya, and there's so many people who are doing out of ignorance. So I'm thinking that as a father, we would do that. So I'm still struggling to understand that. But at the same time, my concept, part of understanding is that's why Krishna created the concept of reactions. So that's why when we hit a stone, at least now we should realize it. So just a painful reminder that this is not a right place for us to be there, and just try to find and search for a better solution. So that aspect, if you could highlight.
Yeah, you maybe almost perfectly answered it in your final statement. And Prabhupada says all the time, this material world was created by Krishna to give the conditioned soul an opportunity to try to enjoy separate from Krishna, but ultimately purify from that desire and go back home, back to Godhead. So by giving us the painful reactions, it's the reminder that we're on the wrong path. If those grooves on the side of the highway don't ring loudly in our ears, we drive off the road. They're the reminder that we're getting off track. So the painful reactions, the devotee is very grateful for them, because it is a reminder, better not do that again. Right? Because if there were no reactions to trying to enjoy separate from Krishna, then how we would ever have any hope to find our real experience in life. So Krishna has manufactured this system in a way that allows us to try to experience this, but also at the same time has reminder after reminder. But ultimately it's up to us, because even the child in the home, if he chooses not to follow father, what does the child do? They leave the home. So the mother and father's correction of the child is only there when the child accepts and takes that shelter. Because if they choose not to, they leave the home and they do what they want. So Krishna is never taking away our free will. But he's always there at a moment's notice to bring us back. He's providing so many opportunities. He is sending his devotees. He is coming himself. He has sent his knowledge, the Shastra. He's making all facilities available. But he is not going to force us. Because he loves us and doesn't want to force us to do something we don't want to do. Even he knows it's not good for us. But he sets up a system that makes it very obvious to us. And at least it should be obvious to us. So, we have no one to hold accountable for our lack of progress and realization except for ourselves. We have to stop trying to look at other circumstances, the power of Maya, this Kali Yuga, that, or whatever it is. Because with desire to know, Krishna makes it all happen quickly, instantly. Right? So that is the ultimately the manifestation of the love of Krishna. He doesn't make the process difficult. He doesn't make it arduous. All we have to do is desire. And Krishna does everything else. How more loving he can be. Right? But again, he won't force it to us. Is that okay, Madhuri?
Yeah. So all boils down to having a very strong desire. So even if we seem to feel that we are sincere, if it's not working out, that means the desire is not that strong. Correct?
We have to express the desire and be confident in the mercy of Krishna to make it happen. So we know we can't make it happen ourselves. So my desire isn't independent, right? I can't will myself to Krishna. But I know by the expression of my desire, Krishna will reciprocate with that desire. So our strong desire should not build lack of humility. It's desire and humility. And we are always the responsible party, ultimately, for where we go. So take ownership. Let us all take ownership. It's in our hands. It's in our hands. Krishna's mercy is required for it to happen, but I have confidence. Krishna's always there because he's my supreme, eternal, loving Father. Yes, I can't do it on my own. I can desire to be free of material attachments, but Krishna will make it happen. I can't make it happen. I can desire to be engaged in pure devotional service, but I can't do it on my own. Krishna can make it happen, but he will, because he's my ever well-wisher. Okay? So, yes, we have to have both of those firmly cemented in our heart, and that is the pace of our progress will be big. It's just like anything. If you really have a strong desire to build a fit body, it'll happen by going to the gym. But we can't want a fit body passively. We have to work at it. We have to do our part. Right? So and that should give us confidence. Great faith. It should motivate us. Right? To keep going. Keep going. And ultimately, enjoy it. Sometimes in devotional service we forget to, enjoy the bliss of bhakti. Yes, we be cognizant of all the challenges. Enjoy chanting the holy names of the Lord, reading about, Krishna and his pastimes, reading about Srila Prabhupada, rendering service in the temple. Enjoy it. Nourish it. That is the life of eternal bliss, having this nice consciousness. So, don't make it so heavy. Keep it, focused and light, and experience the bliss. That is what Srila Prabhupada set up for all of us.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare. Any other questions, comments, discussion today?
If time permits,
Yes.
actually, I like the explanation you give a prayer question that by surrendering Krishna, we are learning surrendering to all. He said this. Like I like this word nicely. Because everything is Krishna, so when we surrender to Krishna, we are learning surrender to everything. Now we are respecting everything more than before. We have respect on people, we have respect on relations, everything. We have more. Basically, we are surrendering to all. Is that right understanding?
Yeah, Prabhupada says that if you want to love everyone, you love Krishna. Because he is the root of the tree. If you water the root of the tree, all the branches are nourished. So if we learn to repose our love to Krishna, by that we will express our love to everyone. Everything. He says that in the Nectar of Devotion, in the preface. The art of success is to learn where to repose our love. Love the root, all the branches nourish. Love Krishna is the root of everything, and everything becomes the recipient of our love and care. So yes, you have it perfect. So, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Well, if not, next week we'll begin discussing chapter 16 as we continue in this thing. And this is we'll see the divine and demoniac natures, and a very stark line will be drawn between who is divine and who is demoniac. And it won't have to do with curly hair and big teeth and horns. It'll be very clear and distinct. We'll discuss that next week in chapter 16. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.